All right, so I'd like to welcome Nick Tobin, former general manager for Willoughby City Council and GM for a number of large property developers, or former GM for a number of large property developers here in Sydney. Welcome to the show, Nick. How are you
Good,
doing?
good morning, CT. Yeah, I'm going well. Bunkered down in freshwater, but hey, there's worse places.
Exactly, exactly. We do have it easier here in Sydney than, say, New York or South Korea or some of those other
South
places.
Korea, UK,
Oh,
Spain. Yeah, I think we've been very lucky so far.
yeah, we
Well,
really
not
have.
lucky, we've planned it well.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's right. So today I had wanted to ask you a couple of questions because you've got a really unique background having worked for a council. And correct me if I'm wrong, but actually you were working with the Willoughby City Council when they developed the interchange. Is that right?
Yes, the interchange was a private development with the government, the state government, but we were there overseeing the community side of that. And we also developed the Concourse Performing Arts Centre, the
Yeah.
$170 million Performing Arts Centre in the middle of Chatswood as well.
Yeah. So, between that and having worked in other parts of the development world, you're obviously, well versed in the development side of things. And I think you have a very unique view because you've been in both the government side and the private side. So I think that gives you a unique viewpoint on some of the stuff that's going on. And apropos of that, I kind of want to just get your general impression. How do you see the pandemic impacting developers particularly in terms of their need for financing and their access to financing? How do you see that playing out?
It's going to become very difficult. Prior to the pandemic, you saw a lot of the overseas property companies pulling up stumps. They had done their one or two developments. They'd either taken their money, invested in assets within Australia, or they'd taken their money back home. So a lot of the smaller developers have gone. So they have their financing's disappeared. But I think the real issue going forward will be getting money from outside of Australia. Australia really doesn't have enough funds to actually fund all the development we need to do. The infrastructure works, the new residential developments and the commercial developments. So it's going to be quite difficult to get funding going forward. And the other thing that's going to be a major issue is actually demand for stock. And we won't see it in any large numbers for quite some time. And I think that's the issue to create the demand for developers to actually need to do the development. That being said, there'll always be some development, but those larger companies, public listed companies, I think, are going to be the ones that are going to have a much better success rate in getting the finance and being able to deliver new development.
That is something that I've been hearing from the funders out there, both the equity funders and the debt funders, is they both talked about a flight to quality. So it's not so much that they're changing the amount that they're doing, but they have refocused their efforts on things that are in better known places. They're larger projects. They're with more established developers and things like that. So that would kind of reinforce the point that you were making about it's the big guys who probably will do best out of this.
And that's completely correct, CT. The recent purchase of the Channel 9 site by Mirvac is a perfect example of that, where a quality developer has taken on a site and will develop that even in the current environment because of their backing and their ability to fund these projects.
And how do you see it impacting local councils? For instance, do you think that they're going to be holding back on projects or not granting DAs as quickly as possible, or do you think there'll be no effect there?
Look, you'd hope not. It's always difficult to get a development application out of a council. You would hope that this would actually stimulate them to want to move things quickly so they can actually improve their economic viability or the economic viability of their local region. That said, I think it's time for the state government also to look at the whole planning legislation and ensure that the legislation allows things to move a lot quicker than it has in the past. The current minister says, New South Wales minister says he will do that. It's happening. It's now time to get some runs on the board and give clear direction for developers and councils on how to deal with development applications and get them approved on a timely basis.
It's interesting because I was speaking with Ed Blakely, who is acting commissioner with the Land and Environment Court, and he said almost exactly the same thing. And one of the things he pointed to was actually my home state of Texas. He said that's actually a model that he reckons will be adopted. And he said the reason is because they have a requirement that DA be granted within 10 days. And he said, so you can imagine that drives a huge amount of clarity in what can get approved and what can't, and also a lot of technology, so that you don't have sort of these amorphous applications that are coming to random people or departments in a council. You've got most of it is being ticked off by by a computer straight away. And he said that that really has reduced the time and the costs enormously. And he reckons that that's coming in as well.
It must. I mean, the council is supposed to work to a 40-day cycle. If you've ever lodged a development application for something large, you know that it can take up to 12 months or even longer. So the more boxes you can actually tick to say you've got things covered, the better. And it needs to happen sooner rather than later. It's become a huge cost to developers, and therefore a huge cost to the people buying those developments, the mums and dads who want to buy houses and flats to live in.
Yeah. How do you see the state and Commonwealth government playing into this development market? I mean, you just touched on the fact that the state government's going to have to get involved in the planning aspect and change some of the legislation there. Is there any aspect to the recent stimulus or anything else that you're hearing out of government that you think might be good news for developers?
Look, I think there's two things the state and federal government can do. The first is they both have huge land holdings, and they've got the opportunities to actually look at their own land holdings and see what they would like on them, how they can encourage development on them, whether that's at a discounted price, on a leaseback arrangement, something that will actually make the development stack up a lot quicker. So I think that's the number one thing that the council, councils as well. Councils have a lot of land as well, and they should be doing exactly the same. So council, state and federal governments, they're landowners, they've got the ability to stimulate the development industry if they want. The second thing is really all the funding that's been floating around over the last 12, 18 months, the Building Better Regions funds, a lot of road funding, there's the Murray Basin funding program, the money from the Snowy hydro sale, all going out into the regions. I think that's a really important thing that we need to keep focused on is the regions, because there's a real opportunity to provide jobs in the regions. There's excess housing in the region. So there's a real economic benefit if these funding programs continue and actually go into real projects that actually deliver jobs, long-term jobs.
Oh, fantastic. Is there anything else that you think we ought to be thinking about in terms of, the property development world or the finance world as this pandemic continues for some amount of time?
I think it's really about how we keep in touch with each other, how we keep to learn. The industry is one that's very much a social industry from the property developer's point of view. We need to make sure that continues to happen, because it's that networking that actually delivers results for the states and the country. So I think, it's trying times, but I think if we can actually work out how to network and how to continue to learn and come up with new ideas and have a good relationship with the state, federal and local government, then we'll get there in the end.
Fantastic. Nick Tobin, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate that. And you take care and keep well.
Thanks, CT. See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.